Chapter 18. On the Table. We stared at each other for several heavy moments. David's eyes were piercing as he considered the fallout of my trip to Cuba. He suspected more than I had given him. I could feel the accusation in his glare before he said anything. "Impossible," he said, with a finality that left no room for argument. "You're going to sit there and tell me that some well-planned strike on the cartels went awry because some idiot at Militech changed the flight vectors last minute? And then you're going to tell me that some random code hacked Atom Smasher and made him aggressive to the point that your pet data demon had to claw what was left of him out of all that cyberware? I'm not some idiot, Merida. There's too much coincidence going on here." I was going to deflect his paranoia, but he cut me off before I could say a word. "Don't treat me like a fool," he snorted. "You go down to Cuba with the majority of Night City's gangs and edge runners, and none of the gangs come back. Half of Cuba goes black, and the cartel bases are left as irradiated craters. The media is theorizing that they were testing new weapons, and the nuclear explosions are what created the EMPs, which caused the blackout. Now that you're telling me you were there, that story doesn't make sense." David leaned forward across his desk, knitting his fingers together. "So, tell me what actually happened. And this time, don't bullshit me." "I think I've told you as much as I'm willing to," I replied, crossing my arms. "No," David shook his head. "You said it yourself. We're not at odds this time around, and we're not friends, bye-bye. But we are working together toward mutual goals. All of a sudden, Night City's gangs just disappear, and you expect to just accept that without questions or explanation? You wouldn't, so don't expect me to." "You can't make me tell you anything I don't want you to," I protested. David took in a long, deep breath and leaned in just slightly. "Tell me." My lips tightened as I tried to think of a way to refuse. David wasn't stupid, nor was he willing to believe that everything had simply gone my way. Lifetimes of antagonism and competing against one another had taught him better. The convenience of the gangs disappearing was too good. The disappearance's connection to me, as well as Atom Smasher being out of commission, was icing on the cake. But that equation defied credibility. He wasn't having it. And he sat there with me in silence, letting the stillness of the room tell me in no uncertain terms that he was willing to wait just as long as I was, until I came clean with everything. It wasn't like there was any proof to show people, and no one would believe him even if he did have something, because I could write it off as a new brain dance story I was working on. "Fine," I conceded, "but nothing I tell you leaves this room." "Agreed," he said simply. "And I'm going to make it perfectly clear right now that I won't be using anything I tell you unless it's absolutely necessary," I added. "So you thought it was absolutely necessary to use for this escapade?" he stated more than asked. I shrugged. "I don't see why you're so insistent. Everything worked out in your favor. Why not just—" "Because the details matter, Merida, and you know it," David barked, the sound sending a shiver down my spine. "The gangs can't just vanish without literally everyone knowing about it. There will be questions. I need to have answers ready. So stop dragging it out and tell me." I sighed. "Fine. I hired the gangs and edge runners to come to Cuba with me so we could hit the cartels that tried to have you assassinated. If you ever somehow get a hold of the data, it shows that a Militech manager changed the landing points for the gangs' transports, putting rival gangs in the same operational area instead of gangs who could get along." He held a hand up to stop me. "And what actually happened?" "I'm not sure what you—" "Stop with the bullshit, Merida," he warned me. "Just tell me how it actually happened." I gave a grumble but conceded once again. "I used my technokinesis to change the flight paths through Militech systems. That way, if anyone checked, Militech would be blamed." David nodded. "All right, go on." "The gangs and cartels all started shooting at one another," I continued. "Mayroon, Smasher, and I went to hunt a doctor that the cartels used. I was able to track him using different abilities. Why a doctor? David asked. He was a cartel R&D genius, I explained. If he survived, he would have just found another cartel to work for, and I didn't want him making any more trouble. And when you found him? We had him cornered, but he opened an AI reliquary that activated and reprogrammed Smasher's cyberware to force him to attack us, I replied. I considered holding back some detail, but decided to be honest instead. The AI he had contained in it was a shard of myself I'd left in the dark net years ago. I communicate with it often enough, and when it mentioned someone was trying to capture rogue AI, we came up with a little plan. Since he was working with one of the cartels I was going after, we could have the shard get captured by the doctor, hunt the doctor, and open the reliquary so that it could either rewrite or override Smasher. I'm sorry, David said as he processed everything. You can split yourself into shards? I nodded. Like pieces of my mind. Sort of like when you're performing an action at work, but your mind is someplace else. Except these pieces have a mind of their own, and when they come back to me, I retain their experiences. But you said you've been communicating with this one, David pointed out. I have been, I replied. It was an experiment to see if I could do more with the ability than I've done in the past. Turns out that so long as they have a place to be that isn't limited by my conscious state, they can operate independently, indefinitely. David's brow rose slowly. So this shard has been operating in the dark net for a few years now? I smiled and nodded. It has. In fact, she has integrated herself into a vast amount of systems over the years, and we communicate every day. Plotting? He asked pointedly. I shook my head. No, mostly talking about different things she finds. She's the reason you found all of the communications related to the corruption after I gave you the initial collection I gave you, he stated. It wasn't a guess. I had played it off as Alan and the Voodoo Boys helping, but this made things much more clear for him. The Voodoo Boys were good, but digging into government encrypted files that deep for as long as it would have taken them would have set off some sort of alarm. But a being who lived within the code itself, able to see cybersecurity measures as easily as one might see a light switch, could just turn them off and pursue the data at her will. I didn't bother denying it. It made things easier. She grabbed the information and gave it to me. I used it to get us this far. He stared at me quietly, but I could tell he was doing what I would have been doing at the time, assessing the situation for what it was. He let the idea settle for a few moments. Does anyone else know about this shard? Just Mayroon, I smiled. And he won't tell anyone. How can you be sure? David asked, skeptical as always. I laughed, full and unreserved, as if the very idea was absurd. Have you seriously never watched my brain dances? Mayroon is more loyal to me than some of the other fated. He will never say a word that would get me into trouble, even if I could solve the problem with a snap of my fingers. I don't want to call him a dog, because he isn't. He's a person in his own right. But he's as loyal as a dog. He'd rather die than betray me. David looked at me as if weighing the worth of what I'd said. He wasn't 100% positive I was right. He probably didn't think I was close to being right about Mayroon. But he let it go, willing to take my word for it. So, what's next? He continued, dismissing the aside about Mayroon for more productive talk. The city's been cleared of a majority of its criminal element. I'm guessing I can write that off as them not wanting to deal with my no-nonsense regime proposals. No corruption, tough on crime. They saw what I'm doing to politicians and they don't want the heat coming to them? As good of an explanation as any, I shrugged. I'm sure I could get some nomad clan leaders to put out statements to that effect. Smuggling the leaders and what not out of the city so they don't have to deal with warrants at security stops. A bit of credibility from outlaw-adjacent sources won't hurt, David agreed. I can use the lull in gang violence to encourage more close watches of abandoned gang territories to slow people from trying to fill the power gap. Go on TV and do some interviews, I suggested. Right now, you're the golden child. Anti-corruption, attempted assassination, friend of a superstar. Get your agenda on the airways for people to hear. Hell, mention that you discuss the tough on crime parts with me and I'll back you up during my live streams. He sighed as if he hated having to rely on me for anything. And you don't want anything for the help? You'll just let me become mayor and won't get me to try and pull strings for you? I only want what you promised me when we first started down this road, I replied. The go-ahead for my facility, the new land permits, and we can try and push for a few public parks where people can try to grow things as a community. But that's after you see how the cleanup goes. See, the cleanup is what I don't understand, David said as he waved a hand at me. You could drag all of that trash underground right now. You could drop into a lava lake or something. Solve the trash problem instantaneously. Why not just do that? I shook my head, knowing that he didn't understand the point. I wouldn't have either if I hadn't lived through multiple lifetimes of empire building. The solution isn't the point. The point is, people seeing that the work is being done to get to the solution. You're right. I could solve the trash problem at any time. But people would ask questions, and the problem would start all over again, because people didn't see the work that went in to solve it. People aren't grateful for miracles in the long term. I leaned back in my chair and crossed one leg over the other. They don't appreciate it for long. They'd see a clean city and celebrate for a day, ask questions for years, and start tossing trash out on the sidewalks after a minute. But if you show them a facility going up to solve the problem, if you remind them and put it on a timeline, and they see the solution getting worked on every single day, and see results over time, they do appreciate it. David considered the answer. You're trying to condition them to want the city to be clean through daily reminders that we're attempting to do that. I smiled and gave an affirming nod. Yes. People are pretty easy to program behaviors in. The easiest way to get them to do something is to get them to do it every day, without fail, by reminding them. Humans only need to do something about 3 times in general before it starts to become a habit. Tell a person to get up, make your bed, brush your teeth, get dressed. Do it again the next day, then the next. After that, you don't have to tell them. Their brain starts to wake them up ahead of time, so they can get those steps done. And you want clean streets and proper trash handling to be the thing they repeat? David asked. That's your goal in this life? It's the first real step, I nodded. I told you when we started this, I want people to break away from the system and live more independently. I think together we can accomplish that goal. He mulled over my reply before grabbing a cup of tea he had nearby. Cheers then. You've gone from Empress to Kingmaker. I chuckled and smiled up at him. Somewhere out there, I'm still an Empress.